The year was 1884, and Dustwater, New Mexico, was the sort of town that barely clung to the map. The wind came through like a thief, stealing what little comfort the land could offer. Its streets were dry, its people drier, and its sheriff mostly ornamental. But that morning, something different stirred among the clapboard storefronts and adobe alleys. Something that moved like smoke and carried secrets heavier than six-shooters. Her name wasn't known to anyone in town. They called her the widow because she wore black and spoke little. She had arrived a month ago, stepping off the westbound coach with only a small leather satchel and a hunting rifle older than some buildings in town. She rented a room above the tannery and spent her days helping the elderly doctor with his books and supplies. A quiet woman, polite, never smiled. But there was something in her eyes, an edge, a quiet calculation, like she was always 10 seconds away from deciding your fate. No one knew where she came from. No one asked until that morning. It started with a scream near the rail yard. A boy, maybe 12, ran through the streets barefoot, shouting, "There's a body! Somebody's dead!" Sheriff Amos Taylor responded with his usual reluctance, grumbling about wasted coffee as he pulled on his boots. When he arrived, the corpse lay face up in the gravel beside the tracks. Mid-30s, bullet wound dead center in his forehead. No sign of struggle, no wallet, no boots. Just a ring on his left hand, gold with an eagle insignia. The widow watched from a distance, her expression unreadable beneath the shadow of her wide-brimmed hat. She didn't flinch at the sight of blood. She didn't ask questions. But when the sheriff looked up and caught her eye, he saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe, or something worse. Later that afternoon, she came into the sheriff's office, uninvited. "I need to see the ring," she said. Sheriff Taylor blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The dead man by the tracks. He wore a ring. Gold. Eagle crest. I need to see it." He scratched at his beard. "Why should I show you anything, miss?" "Because the man who wore it was a member of something he shouldn't have been. And if he was here, others are coming." The sheriff stared, unsure whether to laugh or reach for his gun. "You're not making a lick of sense, ma'am." She leaned closer. "3 more will arrive by sundown. One of them will try to kill you. The other 2 will take the town hostage to look for something they think I have." He rose slowly from his chair. "You threatening me?" "No," she said, turning to leave. "I'm trying to save your life." And just like that, she was gone, her boots silent against the wood floor, her coat flaring like a shadow caught in wind. By nightfall, her warning rang true. 3 strangers rode into Dustwater, dressed like traders but walking like killers. They asked about a woman. No name, just a description. Black coat, quiet, dangerous. They flashed Union coins and called themselves surveyors, but their hands stayed close to their weapons, and their eyes scanned every rooftop, every window, like soldiers on recon. Sheriff Taylor, despite his usual incompetence, sent word to the widow, but she was already moving. She didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, she walked into the Dustwater saloon and took a table near the back, watching the 3 strangers as they argued softly at the bar. Her voice when she spoke was quiet but sharp. "Tell your commander he's too late. I destroyed the ledger." All 3 turned. Silence gripped the saloon like a noose. One of them, tall, scar on his cheek, eyes like broken glass, reached for his revolver. He never made it. Her rifle was already raised, the crack of it splitting the air like thunder. The shot took him through the neck. He dropped without a sound. The second lunged forward. She pivoted, fired again, this time into his shoulder. He screamed, collapsing against a poker table, blood seeping through his jacket. The third man didn't draw. Instead, he raised his hands. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I was just supposed to confirm it was you. They'll send others, stronger than us, smarter. You should run while you can." "I never run," she said, cocking her rifle again. "Tell them that." He nodded slowly, then walked out of the saloon, hands still raised, boots crunching glass beneath him. When the sheriff arrived, breathless, gun half drawn, he found 2 dead men, 1 wounded, and a saloon full of witnesses who suddenly realized the quiet widow wasn't what she seemed. Later that night, the sheriff knocked on her door. "You were right," he said simply. "I usually am." "Who are you?" She paused, then offered a small, tired smile. "No one," she said. just a ghost with unfinished business. And with that, she closed the door. But the war had already come to Dustwater, and the woman with no name was just getting started. The storm rolled in like an omen, lightning clawing across the black sky as wind tore down from the hills, scattering dust through the hollow streets of Dustwater. Somewhere beyond the ridgeline, hoofbeats thundered like distant drums, but in the widow's room above the tannery, there was only stillness and preparation. She stood before the mirror, not to admire, but to assess. Her face was clean of emotion, her eyes calm and distant. A leather shoulder rig crossed her chest, holding two small Colts under her arms. On the table beside her lay a single sheet of paper, old, yellowed, its writing in ciphers and invisible ink. Her fingers brushed over it before she folded it back into its oilskin pouch. Downstairs, the tannery owner, old Mercer, tapped on her door with trembling fingers. "Ma'am," he said, "Sheriff Taylor's asking for you. Said it's urgent." She opened the door, already wearing her hat. "What happened?" she asked. "Riders came in hard from the North Road. No lights, no warning. Brought a storm with them. I think—" He hesitated. "I think they're not just looking. I think they came to burn the place down." Her jaw tightened. "Then we'll make 'em regret bringing fire to a woman who doesn't burn." At the sheriff's office, Taylor was pacing. 5 riders. One of 'em's that pale bastard who walked out of the saloon last night. He came back with help. Camped out near Miller's old barn, setting up like they planned to siege the town. He looked up at her. "You said you destroyed the ledger." "I did." "Then what the hell do they want?" She stepped toward the window, watching lightning split the sky over the barn's silhouette. "They want what's inside my head," she said. "Names, coordinates, codes my father embedded in me before he died. They think I'm just a carrier, a vessel for secrets. They don't know I'm a weapon." Sheriff Taylor swallowed hard. "You always talk like you're in a war." She turned, her expression unreadable. "Because I never left it." That night, the widow walked alone toward Miller's barn, wind clawing at her coat. She moved like a phantom through the sagebrush, boots silent on the cracked earth. In her satchel was a message, one her father had taught her to deliver only once. The enemy's fire was easy to find. 5 figures around a low flame, armed and armored like mercenaries. One of them stood apart, pale, hair slicked back, coat pressed even in the wind. The man from the saloon. "I told them you'd come," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "But they didn't believe me." "I don't care what they believe," the widow said. "Only what they bleed." He chuckled. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." From the dark, the others raised their weapons. But the widow didn't flinch. Instead, she tossed a small metal sphere into the fire. A flash, smoke, screams, and then chaos. In seconds, she was in motion, drawing both Colts and cutting down the nearest 2 men before they could even see. The third lunged, blade in hand. She dropped low, fired twice. He spun, crumpling into the dirt. The fourth ran. He didn't get far. And then there was one. The pale man who hadn't drawn his gun, hadn't even moved. He stood in the smoke, smiling. "You've been trained," he said, "but you're not the only one." The widow raised her pistols. "Maybe not," she said, "but I'm the last one you'll meet." He moved fast, faster than she expected, but not faster than her. One shot, clean, right through his heart. He staggered, eyes wide with something like surprise, and then fell. By dawn, the barn was ash and the threat was dead. Sheriff Taylor found her walking back into town, blood on her coat, dust on her boots, but her face calm as ever. "You took them all down," he said, "alone." She nodded. "I told you. This is war." "War against who?" She looked past him to the rising sun, eyes hard as flint. "The ones who killed my father, the ones who think this country is for sale. I don't know their names yet, but I will. And when I do, they'll wish I stayed dead with him." And with that, she disappeared into the morning light, leaving only footprints and fear. The next day came quiet, but the quiet was a lie. Dustwater had gone back to its usual rhythm, horses pulling carts, mothers sweeping porches, children kicking cans in the street. But something in the air had shifted. They all felt it. No one said it out loud, But the townsfolk moved quicker, eyes checking over shoulders, hands hovering just a little closer to holsters. In the sheriff's office, the widow leaned over an old yellowed map. Sheriff Taylor and Deputy Roy stood nearby, neither speaking as she traced a line across the parchment with one gloved finger. This, she said at last, tapping the northwest edge near Diablo Ridge, was where my father last reported before he disappeared. Not during a cavalry mission, during a covert assignment. He wasn't scouting Indians, Sheriff. He was scouting agents. Roy blinked. Agents? From where? Europe. Mostly French and Spanish interests, some Prussians too. They'd already made arrangements with certain Confederate officers before the war ended, and some of those loyalties never died. She looked up. The same ones funding these new mercenaries. And they want what he buried in the caves beneath Diablo Ridge. Taylor frowned. What the hell's under that ridge? My inheritance, she said softly, and the reason he died. The ride to Diablo Ridge took most of the afternoon. The widow didn't speak much. She wore her father's old hat pulled low, his rifle strapped across her back, her mind sharp and cold. As they rode, Roy tried to break the silence. You ever think about settling down? He asked with a chuckle. You know, after all this? She didn't look at him. After all this, Roy, there won't be much left of me to settle. They reached the base of the ridge by sundown. It was a dead place. Jagged rocks jutting out like bones, buzzards circling far above. The widow led them to a narrow crevice half hidden by brush and thyme. My father called it the mouth, she explained, dismounting. Said only those who knew the truth should ever enter. I thought it was a story. Taylor lit a lantern. What are we expecting inside? She slid her revolver from its holster. Proof, names, documents, and maybe some ghosts. Inside the cave, the air was cold and close. Their boots echoed through the tunnel as the lantern cast shifting shadows against the damp stone. About 20 paces in, they reached it. An iron lockbox, half buried in the ground, just where her father's journal had said it would be. She dropped to one knee and brushed away the dirt. Roy, she said, keep watch at the entrance. He nodded and backed away. She opened the box with a key worn smooth from years of use. Inside were documents sealed in wax, maps with red marks she recognized as smuggling routes, coded letters, and, beneath it all, a single black envelope bearing the seal of the U.S. War Department. She exhaled slowly. He really was what they said. Taylor whistled. This changes everything. She nodded. Which means they'll be coming. Right then, from outside came the shout of warning. Roy's voice, sharp and panicked. Incoming! She stuffed the papers into her satchel just as bullets exploded off the stone around them. The cave mouth lit up in flashes of gunfire. Someone was already inside. Back tunnel, she said, grabbing Taylor by the collar. Move! They ran through the twisting darkness, the widow's boots never slipping, every turn etched into her memory from old maps and old stories. Behind them came the sound of boots, 6, maybe 7 men, trained, silent, fast. At a fork, she stopped. Sheriff, go left. Find Roy. Cover the ridge. What about you? She loaded her rifle. I'll slow them down. She waited in the shadows. 1 breath. 2. 3. Then the first man stepped into view. She fired, then again, then again. When she emerged from the cave, smoke clung to her coat, her rifle empty. Blood splattered across her glove. Roy was on a rock above the ridge, laying down cover fire. Taylor stood by the horses, already in motion. The widow didn't say a word. She just mounted her horse and rode. There would be no rest tonight. What her father had left behind was too valuable, and too dangerous. And now everyone would be coming for her. The fire in the sheriff's stove crackled as the wind howled across Dustwater's rooftops, carrying dust and tension with it. Outside, the town tried to sleep. Inside, the widow couldn't. The documents retrieved from Diablo Ridge were spread across the sheriff's desk. Maps inked with names of border agents, coded telegraphs from European consulates, records of payments made to known traders. But it was the letter that gripped her now. A simple sheet, folded twice, tucked between ledger pages. No seal, no cipher. It began, for my daughter, if they ever come for me. Sheriff Taylor and Roy sat nearby, silent. They knew better than to interrupt. My father never wrote anything without reason, she murmured, eyes scanning the page. This, this wasn't just a goodbye. It's a warning. Roy leaned forward. What's it say? That I'm not alone. That if they killed him, they'd come for me next. But more than that, he names them. 3 of them. Agents placed in the U.S. government. He knew. She looked up, something like fire behind her eyes. Which means now I know. By mid-morning, Dustwater was stirring again, oblivious to the war brewing beneath its dusty streets. The widow rode out, flanked by Roy and Taylor. Their destination, a supply post along the Butterfield Trail, where one of the names in the letter, Ambrose Kellum, was said to be operating under a false identity. He wasn't just a merchant, he was a broker. For secrets, for weapons, for treason. The trail was uneventful, too uneventful, the kind of quiet that made her father's instincts itch in the back of her mind. As they approached the post, she signaled for a wide flank. Roy, east. Sheriff, stay behind me. If I don't come out in 5, kick the damn door in. Taylor grunted. That your version of a plan? That's my version of a promise. She dismounted, adjusted the strap on her rifle, and stepped through the swinging doors of Kellum's store. It looked ordinary enough. Rows of feed, rifles on racks, a pot of beans simmering in the corner. Kellum himself stood behind the counter, round-faced and sweating. Morning, miss. Something I can help? Don't lie, she said flatly, walking right up to the counter. Not unless you want a bullet before breakfast. He went pale. I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am. She laid the letter on the counter. You know exactly what I mean. Ambrose Kellum, former Confederate code runner, currently feeding stolen army reports to European buyers. One of 3 named in my father's final confession. The blood drained from his face. Colonel Hawkins, he whispered. So you do remember him. Kellum swallowed. He said he'd never tell. We had an agreement. He also said if you came near me after his death, he'd make sure the gallows waited. Guess what, Kellum? I'm his voice now. Behind her, the door creaked. Kellum's hand darted under the counter, but she'd already drawn. 1 shot. His pistol clattered to the floor before he could fire, his hand mangled. You won't need that anymore. Roy rushed in from the side, Taylor behind him, weapons raised. The widow didn't move. She picked up the ledger from behind the counter and flipped it open. Inside were columns of numbers, names, coded routes. Another piece of the puzzle. We take him back to Dustwater, and we make him talk. By nightfall, the widow sat alone in her father's study. Her eyes burned from reading, but the pieces were forming something new. 3 names, 3 locations, 3 betrayals, and 1 name she hadn't expected, Isaiah Blackwood, a ghost from the Raven's Claw gang. She thought she'd finished that story, but now it seemed Blackwood hadn't been just a gang leader. He'd been working for someone, and he was still out there, waiting. The train whistle echoed across the canyon walls, low and mournful, like a warning no one had time to heed. Dustwater Station stood quiet in the morning sun, its usual crowd thinned to a few laborers and a half-asleep station clerk sipping watered-down coffee. But behind the freight platform, hidden beneath the canvas of an abandoned supply wagon, sat the widow, her rifle balanced across her lap like an extension of her breath. Her eyes weren't on the tracks. They were on the man who had just stepped off the train, Isaiah Blackwood. She knew that gait, confident, slow, the kind that didn't worry about bullets or consequence. His black coat fluttered in the breeze, wide-brimmed hat casting shadow over the jagged scar that ran beneath his right eye. He was supposed to be dead. She had shot him herself. But ghosts, it seemed, had a nasty habit of crawling back when you needed them least. Blackwood walked with 2 companions, strangers, well-dressed, military posture. European. The same accent she remembered from the camp near Table Mesa. Roy's voice crackled through the small receiver tucked beneath her collar. You sure it's him? I'd bet my father's watch on it. Sheriff Taylor came next. Orders? Let him walk. For now. The widow tracked them with her scope as they moved toward the old telegraph office at the edge of town. That office hadn't sent a real transmission in months. It was a shell, boarded up and forgotten, which made it the perfect place for a meeting not meant to be recorded. She moved fast and low, ducking between buildings, keeping to the shadows. Her boots barely disturbed the dirt. 10 years ago, her father had shown her how to blend into the desert like a ghost. Now she moved like one. At the rear of the telegraph building, she paused, placing a palm against the splintered wood. Voices inside. Still haven't recovered the cipher, but we know she has the key. Blackwood's voice. Rougher now, but unmistakable. And the colonel's daughter? She's more dangerous than anyone expected. A bitter chuckle. We told you. Jonathan Hawkins didn't train a daughter. He forged a weapon. She drew in a breath, steadying the fire boiling in her blood. They knew her, watched her, used her father, killed him. A new voice spoke, refined, European. Miss Hawkins is an asset or a threat. There is no in-between. Retrieve the watch or erase her. The next moment was instinct. The door exploded inward on her boot. Her rifle was already at her shoulder. Step away from the map and put your damn hands where I can see them. Blackwood turned slowly, hands lifted, amused. Well now, ain't this a familiar feeling? The other men weren't as calm. One reached for his pistol. She didn't give him the chance. A shot rang out, sending his weapon skittering across the floor. Try that again, she said flatly, and you'll be bleeding from a more important artery. Roy and Taylor stormed in seconds later, rifles raised. The men froze. The widow moved toward the table. A map lay stretched across it, marked rail lines, towns, locations tied to military routes, smuggling paths. Blackwood watched her. You're too late, you know. This isn't just about gold or guns anymore. No, she said coldly. It's about control, sabotage, turning the Southwest into a powder keg. He grinned. Now you're starting to see. She leveled her rifle at his chest. Why? You had money, power. Why sell your soul to them? His grin faded. Because your father did first. The room dropped into stillness. What? Blackwood stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Jonathan Hawkins didn't just spy for your precious union. He made deals, same as the rest of us. Only difference is, he grew a conscience. She didn't blink. Liar. Ask your fancy Secret Service friends, he said. Ask Hollister. Ask why your father's file was sealed with a black stamp. He wasn't a hero, just a man too deep to crawl out. Her hands trembled for the first time in weeks, not from fear, from doubt, from the shiver of something long buried clawing its way up. Taylor stepped forward. Let's take them in. No, the widow said quietly. Not yet. She turned to Blackwood. You're going to write a letter. He laughed. To who? To the men you're working for. Tell them you've got the watch. Tell them to come get it. He frowned. That'll bring hell to your doorstep. She chambered around. Then I'll be ready. The moon rose over Marigold Ridge like a silent witness, bathing the canyon in cold silver light. Down in the valley, the widow stood alone near the well-worn fence of her father's land. No longer a homestead, but a battlefield in waiting. Wind rustled through the sage, carrying the scent of mesquite smoke in a promise of violence. They were coming, not bandits, not drifters, but polished boots on foreign feet, men who fought in velvet whispers and smiled with poison under their tongues. The letter Blackwood had penned under duress had done its job. It lured them here, to the place they thought she'd be weakest, the place where she was strongest. Behind her, Judge Hollister's son, Thomas, sat in the shadows of the barn, rifle across his knees, a ledger open in his lap. Santiago stood further west, near the bluff, eyes locked on the trail from Tucson. Both men had seen battle now. Both had chosen to stay. You still trust me? The widow had asked earlier that day. Santiago's answer had been simple. I trust what you stand for. And now under that same rising moon, she waited. At 2:14 a.m., the silence broke. 3 riders, then 5, then more, 10 men in total, all moving with the precision of a military escort. At their center, a black stagecoach, windows curtained, wheels soundless on the sand. It stopped at the edge of the Hawkins property. She stepped into the open, calm and steady, rifle slung low. The stage door creaked. From within stepped a woman, tall, elegant, draped in midnight silk. Her face was smooth and ageless, but her eyes held centuries of calculation. "Miss Hawkins," she said with a European accent as sharp as cut glass, "or do you prefer Elellanena now?" "I prefer the truth." The woman smiled thinly. "Then let's trade the watch for answers." Elellanena tossed the silver timepiece forward. A man in the shadows caught it, examined the casing, then gave a nod. "Very good," the woman said. "Your father would be proud." Elellenena's hand moved to the rifle slung at her back. "Tell me what he died for." The woman walked a slow circle around her, speaking in a low, rich voice. "Your father uncovered a network stretching from Vienna to Veracruz. Smugglers, saboteurs, politicians. He tried to warn Washington, but we had friends there too. So he turned rogue, hid the cipher, trained his daughter." She stopped, but not well enough. Elellanena drew her rifle in one fluid motion and fired. Once. The glass lens of the woman's monocle shattered. Silence followed. No one moved. "That was your warning shot," the widow said. The woman raised a single hand, halting her guards. "You're braver than he was. I'm freer than he ever got to be." More boots approached from the eastern ridge. Marshal Parker's men, arriving right on cue. Hollister had sent them after reading the decoded cipher. The cavalry was here, but the widow never looked away from the woman in silk. "You're surrounded," Elellanena said. "This is over." But the woman only smiled. "Child, this was never about winning." From beneath her dress, she drew a small detonator. Elellenena's eyes widened. "Your father kept secrets. So did you. But I don't mind dying in fire. Do you?" Before the trigger could be pressed, a single shot cracked through the night. Not from Elellenena's rifle, from the bluff. Santiago. The bullet struck the device clean from the woman's hand, sending it flying into the dirt. Her guards drew steel, but it was too late. Parker's men poured from the shadows. Orders shouted, hands raised, firepower leveled. The black stagecoach men were disarmed and bound before a word more could be said. Elellanena approached the woman, who now knelt in the dust, stunned. "You gambled wrong," the widow said. "And yet," the woman replied, bitterly amused, "you still don't know everything." "Maybe not," Elellanena whispered, "but I know how to finish a fight." By sunrise, the ridge was quiet again. The prisoners were en route to Fort Yuma. Santiago sat near the porch, sipping bitter coffee. Parker had taken Blackwood into full custody, and Hollister had promised the government would finally open the files, her father's included. But Elellanena didn't wait for paperwork. She stood by her father's grave, the silver watch in her palm once more. "This ends with me," she whispered. Then she turned, saddlebag packed, Winchester loaded, a new trail waiting on the horizon. The West was still wild, but so was she, and the legend of the widow sharpshooter had only just begun. And so, across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, because out here there are still so many truths left to tell, each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.